growing up in the Pacific Northwest, anybody who's from that part of the world can testify to this. The mountain appears and disappears under the gray uh, blanket of clouds that's always uh, present in our lives there. But when it did appear, it was a revelation. And uh, folks in the Pacific Northwest would have this very charming way of exclaiming. I mean, it was partly when the sun itself came out, but when the sun came out, the mountain would come out. And people would say to each other, the mountain is out. And there was a sense of delight and appreciation to be back in the presence of this great mountain. As a child, I think I both appreciated this great mountain, but didn't appreciate it enough. And all these years later, I'm returning to it with a recognition that it formed me and shaped me and gave me a sense of who I am. This is another place that has shaped me, very different from the image that I just shared with you a moment ago. This is the chapel at Redwoods Monastery in Northern California. If you ever wish to visit there, or maybe some of you have visited there, you would arrive in San Francisco, you would drive north on Highway 101 for about 4 hours until you get to a little town called Garberville, and then you would head west over to the coast, another 30 or 40 minutes down increasingly tiny and pothole riddled roads until you come to a little wooden bridge, which you cross and enter the property into Redwoods Monastery. This is home to 10 or 11 women, Cistercian nuns. They originally came from Belgium in 1962. And if you know something of the history of monasticism, uh, it's really interesting how something that began in one part of the world can be uprooted and transplanted into another part of the world. So it's called making a foundation. And four women came to California into a very wild, remote corner of California in 1962 to establish this little monastic community. And it's been going ever since. I wandered up Highway 1 and onto this property when I was a young man in the late 1970s. I myself was searching for something, and someone had recommended that I try to visit this place. I did visit Redwoods. They welcomed me with the kind of monastic hospitality that has been practiced for centuries, and I've been returning ever since to join this community in prayer and to sit in silence and to try to open myself to the deepest currents of spirit in my life. You'll notice from this image that the architecture of this space is already quite eloquent. It's a simple cinder block chapel with wooden pine benches, um, concrete floor, a simple altar. Behind the altar, there's this wall of glass, behind which is this beautiful redwood tree, behind which is a meadow and forest, and the creek runs in the forest all the way to the Pacific, often teeming with salmon. Prayer in this space, contemplative practice in this space feels boundaryless. Where does the inside stop and the outside begin? Where does the inner world cease and the outer world begin? You feel them moving together in this beautiful harmony. And I share this image with you partly to give a sense of what place and prayer can feel like when they move together. So let's begin with a question from the poet Novalis, who asks and answers his own question. He says, "Where are we really going? Always, always home." Let's begin with this question of where home is for us, what homecoming feels like, what it feels like to be without a home, wandering, searching. Home, however, remains a bedrock question that I hope we can consider together this evening. What does it mean to have a home, to lose a home, to reclaim home at an ever deeper level in our lives? And a second thought as we begin, it's from the poet Wendell Berry, who says in one of his poems, "There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places." It's an astonishing statement. There are no unsacred places. We habitually divide up the world between sacred and profane, or we think of all the places that we've made profane. But this is, I think, the beautiful heart of his insight. There are only sacred places and places that we've desecrated. Now, not everybody in this meeting, and certainly not everybody that we share this world with, will identify with this kind of language. It's religious language. But I think we can share a sense of what it means to claim and identify a place as sacred, as set apart, as having special significance. And I think we all know, whether we're religious or not, what it means for a place to be desecrated. We understand immediately if a synagogue or a church or a graveyard is desecrated. It's something that should never be um, treated lightly or treated carelessly. And we're now beginning to understand that this language can help us understand the depth of our feeling for what we're doing to the natural world. So hold on to this thought of what it might mean for us to recover a sense of place as sacred. We have to acknowledge at the outset uh, one of the great realities of our time, which is the reality of place loss. It's something we are ever more conscious of with each passing day. There are cases where we are able to push back against place loss, where we are able to participate in the reclaiming or the healing of places. I think it's important to acknowledge that and to recognize that, in fact, we are experiencing, occasionally anyway, the work of healing that involves restoration of places that have been damaged. At the same time, it's clear that the damage to the world is deepening. And again, as with Wendell Berry, the theologian Thomas Berry uses religious language to ask, well, what is it we're losing when we desecrate places, when we lose places, when we clear cut forests or fill up ancient wetlands with housing developments, when we do any number of things. And Berry uses the language of divine presence. We're losing splendid and intimate modes of divine presence. We are perhaps losing ourselves. So the question of what we're losing when we lose the places that are precious to us in this world is an important question. And again, I would say whether you identify as religious or not, it's good to ask about the depth of the loss that we're experiencing and to search out language that helps us express the depth of that loss, as well as the depth of our love for these places. So if you haven't guessed by now, you will have noticed that my own thinking about these questions is deeply informed by poets, also mystics, and others who I believe help us slow down and look more carefully at things and and overcome or push back against our proclivity for just taking a glancing look at things, looking more deeply, or what the ancient monks called prosoche, or attention, as a contemplative practice. Here's an example that I that I love from the Polish poet Czesław Miłosz. He moved to California at midlife and became a Polish California poet, collaborating with Robert House to translate his works into English. This is a poem that calls to mind his childhood in Lithuania. I liked the bellows operated by rope, a hand or foot pedal, I don't remember, but that blowing and blazing of fire, and a piece of iron in the fire, held there by tongs, red, softened, ready for the anvil, beaten with a hammer, bent into a horseshoe, thrown in a bucket of water, sizzle, steam, and horses hitched to be shod, tossing their manes, and in the grass by the river, plowshares, sledge runners, harrows, waiting for repair. At the entrance, my bare feet on the dirt floor, here gusts of heat, at my back, white clouds. I stare and stare. It seems I was called for this, to glorify things just because they are. I appreciate so much how the poet locates himself in this story. At the entrance, my bare feet on the dirt floor, calling to mind some old memory, a feeling that's perhaps still held in his body. It's an invitation, I think, for all of us to do the same. Where in our experience have we encountered the world in this way, in this vivid, palpable, particular, even sacramental way? What would it mean for us to recover from our own memory the feeling of being alive in the world, not just in this moment, but across the whole of our lives? So these are the questions this evening. What does it mean to cultivate a sense of place? What does it mean to cultivate a sense of place or a sense of home during this time of acute and widespread displacement? What kinds of practices and dispositions can help us deepen the contemplative work of placemaking? Some elements of this practice are so simple as to uh, easily escape us if we're not prepared for the beauty of simplicity. And Scott Momaday speaks of places where you touch the pulse of the living planet. You feel its breath upon you. Something as simple as touch can be so transformative. And again, the invitation here is to slow down and allow all our senses to open and to feel the beauty and the power of touch to help reconnect us to this fragile, still beautiful world. The Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega y Gasset asks about the relationship between place and identity. Tell me the landscape in which you live, and I will tell you who you are, he writes. Place and identity. It's probably true that none of us, few of us perhaps, or maybe most of us would not want to be completely reduced in our identity to where we're from or where we've lived. That's fair. But Ortega y Gasset is getting at something else here. What elements of your very self can you not imagine apart from the places that have formed you? So it's a good question to consider. Place and identity. How have you become the person you have become, and what places in your life are responsible for having formed you and shaped you? The particularity of place. This is one that I think is so kind of glaringly obvious that we're also tempted to look past it. I remember the first time I read this sentence by Clifford Geertz. No one lives in the world in general. It made me laugh a little bit uncomfortably, I must say. Oftentimes, because of our education and other uh, elements of our life, we've succumbed to too many generalizations about everything. And here's Geertz reminding us it's in the particulars, in particular places that we come into being. When you speak of a native place, it means the one and only place where you came into the world, where you were born. You may have subsequently lived many places, but you came into the world here and nowhere else. This is my little glimpse of my family or part of my family um, at Redwoods Monastery, wandering one day out into the open fields. Um, this place, its eloquence, its power to hold us and move us and carry us, the particularity of place. The French philosopher Simone Weil speaks of rootedness as something absolutely critical to our identity and to our lives. She wrote her great work, The Need for Roots, coming out of the disaster and the pain and the destruction of World War II, when her fellow countrymen and all across Europe couldn't even imagine what it might mean to reclaim their rootedness in the world. Homelessness was the prevailing sense of life at the time. And Simone Weil writes, to be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. We may be wanderers at times in our lives. We may be vagabonds. We may need to move. We're living in a time of intense migration around the world. Sometimes movement is necessary and unavoidable. And yet, she's calling us back to the sense of what it is to be of a place, part of a place, knowing a place, even allowing the place, we might say, to know us. This work of placemaking, as I'm describing it, also means reanimating the sense of home. Even if home is painful or ambiguous, even if your own leave taking of home was under circumstances that left you feeling uneasy about home. It's true for many of us. And yet, the idea of home, the reality of home, calls to us continuously. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard says, Home is our corner of the world, our first universe, a real cosmos in every sense of the word. All really inhabited space bears the essence of the notion of home. So here we come to, I think, what is in some ways one of the deepest questions that we are facing in this moment. What will it mean for us to recover what Keith Basso, the anthropologist who worked for many years with the Western Apache in Arizona, called our place worlds? Recovering our place worlds, our very sense of being part of a place that is itself a kind of cosmos. And here Basso, I think, agrees with Ortega y Gasset in this sense when he says we are, in a sense, the place worlds we imagine. So giving some attention and care into reflecting on the place worlds that we're a part of, that have formed us, claiming them, owning them, reclaiming these place worlds that are ours. And again, Basso, I think in a way that I find quite beautiful in his book, Wisdom Sits in Places, he thinks of placemaking as a contemplative practice. You begin meditating on the places that have marked and shaped you, not just you, but your community. And it starts to open up and open up and open up. And what he calls whole networks of associations open up in our awareness. And we realize that how deeply we've been marked by these places. This takes some intentionality on our part, but it also can be, I think, related to practices of contemplative prayer and meditation, where instead of opening ourselves up to silence or emptiness or the vastness within, those are all worthy elements of contemplative practice. What about the places that have formed us, the places that are deep within us? Placemaking as contemplative practice. So I'm going to go for about 5 more minutes, if that's okay, and we'll just continue down this line, and then we'll pause, give everybody a chance to catch their breath, and also we'll hopefully open up a space for each of you to reflect on this work of placemaking as it relates to your own life. That's my hope for this evening, that there'll be some opportunity for you to do that in a way that is helpful to you. So the idea of the sense of place is, I think, important to pause over. And again, I call upon a poet to help us with this. It's very interesting. There are cultural geographers and ecologists and biologists who've thought a lot about place, as well as philosophers, as well as mystics. But often it's the poets who are helping us the most, partly just through the simplicity and directness of their observation. Here's Seamus Heaney with what feels to me one of the best accounts of what it means to cultivate a sense of place. It is the feeling, assenting, equable marriage between the geographical country and the country of the mind that constitutes the sense of place in its richest possible manifestation. A marriage between the geographical country and the country of the mind. It's worth thinking about that convergence in our own experience, how our own consciousness, our minds constitute a kind of inner landscape in which the world that we've been living in and moving through our whole lives has a place and speaks to us, the sense of place. Wallace Stegner great Western American writer, reminds us of our part in the work of placemaking. And he says, no place is a place until the things that have happened in it are remembered in history, ballads, yarns, legends, or monuments. There's my doggie barking in the background. Oh, placemaking, remembering, telling, loving. So then it's places aren't just inert uh, objects somewhere to be located on a map. They are activated and they're brought alive by our own storytelling and by the love that we pour into these places. I love this observation of Stegner's. The great indigenous writer Leslie Marmon Soko, whose novel Ceremony I recommend to you, is one of the best meditations on the placemaking and the healing of place that I can think of. She says in Ceremony, which is a story of devastation and loss, among other things, terrible, terrible loss, and the longing for recovery and healing, and the storytelling that helps to bring about that healing. She says, I will tell you something about stories. She's talking about stories of place. They aren't just entertainment. They are all we have to fight off illness and death. You don't have anything if you don't have stories. And Bell Hooks, whose beautiful essay, Kentucky is My Fate, describes having to leave Kentucky because of its racist structures that um, did so much harm to her, her family, and so many people she knew. And she fled all the way out to California to go to school in Stanford, but she eventually made her way back. And she found at a different moment of her life a place of refuge in her home place. And she describes it as the land, this land was a place where I could imagine myself beyond the structures of domination. So, what does it mean for a place to be a healing place, a liberating place? I think these are good questions for us to be considering together. And as I draw to a close, I want to return to the question of home and homecoming. Some of you may know the work of Father Gregory Boyle. He works at, or he founded Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, which is the largest gang intervention uh, project in the world. Beautiful man, Jesuit priest, the least priestly priest you'll ever meet. If you have a chance sometime to sit down and have a beer with him. But Homeboy, at the heart, in the heart of Los Angeles, is this great place of refuge. And his own sense of that is that it's a place of homecoming. And he writes, all authentic spirituality is a homecoming. Home is the place where abandonment can't ever happen. We don't just walk each other home to wholeness. We are home to each other. So there's a powerful social meaning to homecoming and to placemaking. It's about the natural world, certainly, but it's about our relations with others, especially those who've been harmed the most by our social structures. The great image of this in the Bible is the parable of the prodigal son, the son who became estranged, lost, exiled, and in addition to that, uh, heaped upon himself the shame of having left his home, left his family, and who found himself astonished to be welcomed back home without question, without condition, a beautiful experience of grace and mercy and tenderness. So to conclude with this, it's just the great environmental writer Aldo Leopold calls us to, I think, an ethical, spiritual transformation. He says we can be ethical only in relation to something we can see, feel, love, or otherwise have faith in. Thank you for your patience and your willingness to walk with me down that path. Um, I have asked Dan about this, and I think my own preference, Dan, if we can manage this, is to do two things. One is, ever since COVID started, perhaps like many of you, I was thrown into the world of Zoom with students, with friends, with family. It was in some ways a lifesaver that we were able to meet each other across time and space in the midst of that terrible time. Um, One of the things that I love about this medium, it has its limitations for sure, but is this little thing called a chat function. And I would like to invite each of you to take a moment to write something in the chat um, in response to what you've been thinking in these past 20, 30 minutes. A thought, a feeling, an image that caught your attention, anything at all. It doesn't have to be long. Just drop something in the chat that helps locate you in your own thoughts in this moment. And we'll just I'll mute myself now and also just wait for that to unfold and just take your time. We'll take 5 minutes or so and just see if you can give expression in the chat to something that's moving in you in this moment. Okay? They're really beautiful, beautiful reflections. And I suspect there might be a few more tumbling out. Take your time. Um, I really appreciate that. Well, part of what's emerging here are the actual places that have meant something to you all. And I think it's understandable that you should go there immediately. Um, and I think it's very important that we do this also, with this very particular specific focus on this place or that place. Um, I really appreciate this. Um, so I've learned from your fearless leader that not everybody loves to go into breakout rooms. And I think it is nice to go into breakout rooms also for a little bit of time. But sometimes people, I've had this feeling myself, it's time to go into breakout rooms. I can feel my inner introvert, kind of going, oh God, who am I going to be with? And then almost always there's something lovely that unfolds in that space. And but before we do that, I do have just a very simple question that's a follow-on to what a lot of you've already written. Um, I wonder if anybody wants to comment out loud in this moment of anything that's moving in you or about what you wrote or what somebody else wrote. If anybody has a comment, I don't know if it's your practice actually to share in the larger group, but I want to invite that if you feel so moved. So let's just take a moment before we shift. Yeah. So there's Alan. Thanks, Alan.
Makes me realize I need to be more intentional to get my grandson off his screen and out in nature. This
Mm.
is his time. He's 11. This is his time to experience this sense of place that you've been speaking of
Yeah.
and really have it part of his soul.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I wonder how many of you can recall being taken out into the world by someone, father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, cousin, somebody. It often happens that somebody initiates us into the living world. So it's a beautiful thought you have. Yeah. Anybody else wish to comment?
Oh, I'll say, because I have a thought, and also as my role as the co-host, um, maybe I can break down some reluctance by speaking a little bit to myself as well, and opening up because I'm an introvert as well. But I was one of the folks mentioned this notion about how in the conventional Christianity that so many of us were brought up in, everything was about exploiting the earth. And, either very overtly or subtly, that was the message that came across rather than revering the earth and what it meant in terms of our spiritual lives, it's our spiritual home, that whole kind of mindset that you brought across in what you talked about, Doug. And as I've learned more about the Christian mystics and the other mystics, that's a common theme, right? The reverence for the earth and what it all is. And yet, in many religions, it is taken in the wrong direction, or at least that's what I was exposed to as a kid, both in Christianity and other things. So I that's become a super important thing for me. And the way you expressed it is beautifully done when you're in those spaces and what you feel. And that's kind of reinforces this whole notion of a deep spirituality and our deep connection.
Yes. Yes. I appreciate that. What you're saying. There's a lot of healing needed in the Christian tradition, certainly. And but the elements are there. Increasing numbers of people are responding to those basic sacramental sensibilities of reverence for the living world. Um, but it hasn't, we have a checkered history that we need to, well, to use an old-fashioned theological world, some of which we need to repent of, even as we're seeking renewal of mind and heart and being. So thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? I'm not trying to nudge all you good introverts out of. Yes, please.
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, well, there's so much to say, and we could say more about what you and Dan were just alluding to, but I wanted to mention the the quote from N. Scott. Is it Monaday?
Day. Yes.
Yeah. When you touch the planet, when you touch the place of the living planet, you feel its breath upon you. And I love that he referred to the planet as the living planet. And also those words that poets often capture, but of our senses, when you touch the living planet and you feel its breath upon you, um, it does bring us back to feeling alive in nature and finding our place in nature. And those are sensitivities that we all experience. And in another sense, it brings us back to each other. But just in that one sentence, I thought he captured so much.
Yes. 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 Thank you. Anyone else want to join in the fun? Well, let me try this, and then if we don't, if nothing else unfolds, that's fine. We can shift from here. I wonder if anybody would be willing to comment on the place or places that came to mind that several of you wrote about as you found yourself reflecting on these questions. It was quite beautiful to see that, and already in the chat, there's this kind of wonderfully varied geography emerging of places that people know and love and are attached to. I wonder if anybody would be willing to comment on that, places that came up for you as we were reflecting together. Yeah. Yeah, Linda?
Yeah, thank you. I went to a YMCA camp when I was 11 or 12, I think, and in Colorado, which is where I was living. Um, and the last night or two was where you would go on a backpacking trip, and so we hiked into, and I had hiked with my family before, but this was a bigger hike than I had ever done before, and it's the first time, and I still can distinctly remember the hike and when we got above tree line and all of the wildflowers that were around this lake that we camped at. And then the next day, we hiked up this pass and climbed south Arapahoe Peak, which is, I think it's not a 14er, I think it was like 13,500 feet. So, it's way up there, especially for an 11 or 12-year-old. And I just so distinctly remember the recognition that I was just a speck in the universe. That, 11 and 12-year-olds, you're starting to kind of think that the world revolves around you. And, I just remember looking out at that top of the mountain where you could just see literally for miles and miles and realizing how unimportant I was. And I think it was, I always remember that. I think it was a really good, uh, realization for me at that age. And I also know that it made me become an environmentalist. It just made me realize the beauty and grandeur of our earth. And so I'm, such a kind of a simple, little experience, but how important it's been in my life.
That's amazing. 11 years old. And you can recall it in this moment very vividly,
Yeah,
as if it's not as if it's still alive in you, the
yeah,
feeling.
right. It is still alive in me. Yeah.
And you know, that observation by Aldo Leopold, it's really it meant a lot to me, and I think to a lot of people, but we can only be ethical in relation to something we can see, feel, love, and have faith in. And Leopold wasn't a person of faith by any stretch, but he used this language because I think he felt that we need something strong. And you're describing an experience as a young girl where something got inside of you, a feeling. I mean, you talked about yourself as feeling little, but then you also used the word grandeur later. I suspect you felt the power of the immensity
Right.
that you were part of.
Right, that I was part of that
Yes.
immensity, part of that grandeur. Yeah.
And that feeling has carried you into your work and into your life.
Mhm.
I note that I think partly to say that I think we sometimes underestimate the value and the power of feeling encounters in our lives. Oh, that's just small, that's just personal. Well, it may be small and personal, but it has the capacity to reverberate out and out. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Um, anyone else of a place that you want to speak to? And in my experience, part of the joy of connecting communally with places is that you begin to realize that the love you have for a place or places, uh, it's like you get a chance to describe. It's like describing your best friend who you really think is cool, and this is the place that is so amazing. And maybe nobody else in this room knows it like you do. Anyway, I wonder if anybody else has a place you want to lift up, even just the simple fact of the place that has meant something to you. Yeah. Yeah, Teresa.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this session. I have a fascination with sort of the beginnings and the ends of rivers and points along them. So I live in upstate New York, and we live within an hour or so drive of some of the streams that feed into the Delaware River and also the Susquehanna. And they arise. We've gone to look at some of the places where you can see the river start. So they just, in some places, the stream just sort of appears out of the middle of a wetlands, and is just a tiny little stream that meanders around. And so one of those stream that's like that is where two of my great grandparents and two of my great grandparents are buried. And it's just along the side of the cemetery, which is on a hill. There's a sort of a bubbling stream. It's come down the hill from the wetlands where it started, and that feeds into the Unadilla and then into the Susquehanna. And then at the other end, and those of you from the Northeast have probably driven this route as well. If you're on I-95 in Maryland, northeast of Baltimore, you cross the Susquehanna where it feeds into the Chesapeake Bay, and it's very wide and a very, mighty river, and the Delaware even more so. We were just at Rehoboth Beach, and you can hardly see Cape May across the mouth of the Delaware. It's just this immense river. And then, of course, we've been to various places along the way, but, rivers, of course, have such a powerful metaphor for our paths in life. And I just love visiting those places that are the beginnings and the ends and the parts in between.
That's beautiful. Your description of the little barely discernible source of that river is so wonderful, and you evoke the place for us, and not only in the landscape, but in relation to is it your parents who were born there, buried there? Or
Great grandparents and great grandparents. Yeah. And
just
yeah, I actually have a picture of that cemetery. I'll be very brief about this, but I've been working on a project called They Were There and So Were We, which is about my great grandparents' emigration from Ireland in the 1840s. And their settlement in central New York, and it's not far from where we live too. So it turns out that we've traveled through and been in many of the same places, and I hadn't really focused on that until recently. So, for example, they would certainly have taken the Erie Canal from, I live in Schenectady, from Schenectady to near where they lived. And so I have like a page that has a picture of what the canal would have looked like at the time. And then this is a picture of the current state of one of the locks from the canal as it existed at that time. So they would have traveled through that lock. And there's something that just undoes me about being in the place that they would have been in. And especially somehow not having realized it at the time. I can't articulate really how that makes me feel. But anyway, oh yeah, so one of those places I have a photo of this. I don't know if you can really see it, but of the cemetery that they're. We just went out to visit it not too long ago, and there was just the most beautiful light coming through the yellow trees that I'll just never forget. It's and there they are.
Yes. Well, is it Therese or Therese?
Therese.
Therese. Therese, you've been hard at work in the work of placemaking for some time now. That's what this is that you're doing. It's beautiful and very
Thank you.
personal to you, but opens out onto a larger landscape. It goes back in time. It's really wonderful.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. It's been a restorative sort of process for me. Oh, and I just want to take a moment and go back to the thing about the river, where the river starts. So not too long after we've lived here for 40 years now, but not too long after we moved here, I was looking at a map of the area, and I just like maps and I like to sit and look at them. And I noticed along a road, it's about an hour drive from here, this little stream, marking of a stream just appearing out of nowhere right next to the road. And then I followed it down and it said Delaware River. So we drove up there, and sure enough, it just appears, as I said before, it just appears out of nowhere, but it's like that on the map. And so I'm mentioning that partly to say, if people want to find the beginnings of rivers, sometimes they look like that on the map. It just appears out of nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just one little observation about that. I have a very dear friend out here in California named Ruben Martinez, and he and I travel out into the desert often together. And Ruben has become fascinated with and writes about what often is referred to in indigenous literature as emergent places. And these emergent places in the Southwest are often associated with water rising to the surface in springs and pools. And so what you're describing also has a very strong connection with a feeling of the world coming into being for certainly an indigenous culture, but for others. So I thank you for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for that connection. Thank you.
Um, okay, so my new friend Dan Quinlan, I have not followed your instructions. We didn't go to a breakout room. I suspect we might even not get there, and people are starting to peel off. Uh, People with meetings and appointments and who claim they're not afraid of the breakout rooms, but suddenly they have to leave. But anyway, we'll just let that be. So I do have a question that might connect back to your work in third act, and I wonder, Dan, if you think it would be useful just to stay in this space, or if we still should do a little breakout. What? Tell me your sense of that.
Let's stay in this space, I think. See
Okay.
what happens.
So again, if you're okay with this, to use the chat just as a little mediating space for us to maybe address one other kind of big question before we draw our time to a close. Um, you've all been drawn into this community, this third act community for your own reasons, and perhaps as you get to know one another, you're starting to realize the elements that are shared between you. I would appreciate if you could say something in the chat about whether you think the work of placemaking, as we've been talking about it this evening, can help you in your work in third act. Is it possible for you to imagine that giving room to the work of placemaking can enrich or deepen or contribute to the larger project of third act? I realize that there's a danger of abstraction there, but maybe if you keep it particular to your work and the things that matter to you, you can address it. And so this is my effort to try to connect to the larger project. How can placemaking, in the way that we've been talking about it this evening, contribute to your work in third act as you understand it? So anything you want to say in the chat about that? I'll mute myself again and we'll take a few minutes and then we'll come back and see what emerges. Okay. maybe take another couple moments. Um, so, you know how in Zoom you can keep your camera on or keep your camera off? Um, a few of you still have your cameras on. That's great, but it's fine either way. There are different ways to participate. Um, but the trouble is, if your camera's on and we're having this kind of conversation, I can look at somebody who made a comment and then, oh no, ask you a question. Melanie, I love what you wrote. I wonder if you would mind saying a little bit more just for yourself about these matters. Yeah.
Yeah, I came into Third Act through the faith working group, because very much a sort of a eco eco faith kind of approach. And met all these like-minded people and immediately felt at home. But Working Act has these Third Act has these working principles that I think make us really unique. And there are things like be kind and be humble and boost others. They're just really countercultural. And they make me feel grounded, at home, sort of a sense of heart place where I can build trusting community. And I now actually work for Third Act on staff, and I was retired. I never expected to come back to work, but I love the community so much, and it gives me so much of my rootedness and groundedness in these weird times. Um, it's very much a home to me. Hence,
Yeah.
I'm on this call at 20 after 8 after a 12-hour workday.
Oh, we're almost done, but I loved the connection you made with the idea that Third Act is its own kind of place world. That's
Yeah,
fantastic that you,
I love the idea of expanding the idea of place to. I grew up just outside Washington, D.C., which is a weird place world, like the place of it is beyond just a place in a big way. So the idea of a place world, I love it. I want to read more about it and think about it more, but I like that for Third Act because it feels that way.
yes. Well, and the fact that you can uh, affirm that in what is, after all, a digital space says
Hmm.
something about, like, let's not be too strict about where placemaking happens or how it happens. You're already acknowledging that it happens in an unexpected way, even in a disembodied, placeless place like Zoom. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same sort of serendipitous weird things that happen out in real world happen on Zoom. Last night I was on a welcome call for new third actors, and there was a guy on there from Poland who wants to somehow be involved. And I've been fascinated with Poland ever since I found out it was largely the environmental groups, small local environmental groups that sort of knit the country back together civilly after the dictator was overthrown. And then all of a sudden up crops this guy from Poland who wants to chat and tell us like, wow, this is so cool. So stuff like that happens.
So it's encouraging. Yeah. Yeah. We all need that, I think, for sure. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, Anybody else want to say anything about the connection between the subject of this evening, broadly speaking, placemaking, and then what Third Act is becoming for you, what you think it can continue to become? It'd be just it's just a little constructive move of trying to stitch things together. Or your own experience, actually, just of Third Act, how it's speaking to you.
I'll say for me, I think about the, as elders, we talk a lot about why a lot of us are here because we think about our kids and grandkids and all those kind of things. And the way that you're talking about it tonight has been there in the background, but I didn't really think about it. But it's this idea of these places that I love. I want to protect them for, my kids and future generations and things. And that's a tangible outcome of the work that we're pushing hard to do. So that's nice to have that as a new frame to think about it.
Mhm, mhm. You mentioned, Dan, I appreciate that very much, and I mean, you're offering that as your own uh, felt response to this, what you want to carry away. We talked a little bit when we first met about the contemplative dimension of the work of third act. Now, I am suggesting, of course, this evening that the placemaking has a contemplative character. I wonder if you or anybody else, somebody was saying earlier that they're essentially a contemplative at heart. Can't remember who said that, but is this contemplative work? And like, yeah, it was Jean Morris. Jean, your camera's not on, but I wonder if you're still here. Do you want to say anything about that, being a contemplative at heart?
Man, you're calling me in. I don't know if I'm on or not, but
You're on. You're
You're
on.
on. We
okay.
can hear you.
You had a great
All
comment.
right.
I just wanted to hear more. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think the just the transcendent beauty that God displays in his creation is so wonderful and so amazing that I would rather just sit and reflect upon it than have to work it or fight for it or protect it or explain to others who don't see it why it's worth fighting for and protecting. But I do feel, as a child of God and a sister of Jesus, that in the times I live in, I am sort of thrown into this dual role of I can't just enjoy it and contemplate it and praise it and adore it. I have to fight for it.
Mm.
And it doesn't, yeah. So that's why I'm here. I mean, yeah. And it's even just the nitty gritty of, I want to try to get solar at my house, but it's too expensive and I can't quite do it. And so, yeah, the third act Sunday got me hooked up with third act. And my husband and I just read Bill McKibben's most recent book. And so we're hooked. But it's not my nature, but I feel like it's my duty because
Yes.
I love this earth and I have grandchildren and I'm over 60. So there you go.
Yes.
Hey, Doug,
Yes.
can I say it's all, I'm noting a little bit
Thank
on,
you, by the way, for jumping in. Yeah, and I know we're almost out of time, Dan, but I think that's kind of important what Jean shared actually, because
mm,
A, we often devalue all the things that you described as your natural proclivity, adoring, appreciating, honoring, blessing. Those don't do anything for anybody, but they have this essential, fundamental value. And the second thing is you're kind of climbing out of your contemplative comfort space to participate in the shared work. And that's also beautiful. And so anyway, I
Well,
just appreciate
thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Dan, over to you. I think we're coming to the end here anyway. Yeah.
yeah, before we do that, I wanted to kind of connect with Jean was talking about with what the comments Tina wrote, which was kind of the other side of the coin that I try to do more and more is there's, one side of it is just protecting stuff, but the other side is that, especially these days, it's so easy to get burned out. It's so easy to get frustrated. I mean, on and on. So, and the work we do, I mean, I have to recharge myself like every day. And going outside, reflecting on the amazing biology, and whether it's a visual thing and appreciating, or a sensory thing, appreciating nature in some way, or just thinking about just some aspect of biology or space or something that's incredible, is a way to recharge. So it's in that way, it's kind of a beautiful symbiotic thing. We're working on something that, if we also take time to reflect on why we're doing it and how incredible it is, it's also can really be reinvigorating, and at least for me,
Yeah.
recharge my batteries in a really big way. So it's yeah, there's so many dimensions to it in the way you're framing it.
Well, and whoever it was that referenced the values of third act, kindness and openness toward others, and like these are things that we also have to cultivate daily, to help us remember that we're human beings sharing the world with other human beings, and so kind-heartedness that we also wish to practice in the shared work. So that has an important place as well, just that deepening of our own sense of our humanity. And I love that that's part of third act. Yeah.
So I also just noticed what Teresa just wrote about Turning to the Mystic series. And
Yes.
Brother Lawrence, that series is a great series,
Yes.
and pointing at that as so another thing we're going to do at the end of this is after we're all done is to send folks resources tied to what Doug's been talking about, and we'll include that. Looks like you were trying to say something, Doug.
No, no, no. I was going to just pass it over to you to kind of wrap things up. No, I appreciate. I know Jim Finley a little bit, and I know his work, and he's a wonderful kind of. Well, he's a teacher of the mystical tradition who carries it within him, and this is maybe it is related to the deepening that I was speaking of. That is part of our ongoing work, our personal work, but also communal. So yeah, I love that reference came in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll be happy to know that Jim was one of our early, when we were first testing this whole thing out, Jim was one of our early uh,
Wonderful.
people who come and join us and experiment on this as well. So, those amazing connections. So I want to say, Doug, Douglas, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time and your thoughtful preparation. Thank you for your books and the things that I've read, which as I told you, literally have changed my life. I think about the world in a different way than I did before I read some of your work. And in the coming weeks, or hopefully in the next week, we will be getting out to everybody a recording of the session, and also any resources that Douglas you want to send to me. I'll include those in the emails to everybody. And I just want to express my gratitude for you being here. I want to express my gratitude to all my fellow third actors out there and fellow elders doing what we can to be elders in the world, wise elders. And
Yes.
we have there'll be one more presentation this year in December, and more to come on that. And then we're getting a lineup. We're already working on 2026, and we've got 4 or 5 people already lined up who will be coming and joining us. Some of whom I think you are people you would know, Douglas.
Wonderful.
So I don't
Wonderful.
know. You want to bring us home with some closing words?
Um, I think maybe it's just that it's hard in the world we're living in right now to keep our hearts open. But I think the work that you all are doing in third act, and certainly the work that means the most to me, involves staying connected with others in community and helping one another keep our hearts open toward one another, toward the world, it's really the most important work, I think, in this moment. And this is a wonderful example of that. So I feel blessed to be here with you all this evening. So thank you for that. Yeah.
And thank you right back at you, as they say. So good night, everyone.
Hey, good night.
Keep
Thank you.
smiling. We'll see you in another month or two.
Thank
Thank
you.